Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am back for my Week 6 LPL overview, analysis, and of course, at the end, my updated power rankings. If you guys haven't checked out the series that I've been posting all throughout the weekend here, go check that out now. It is a mid-summer review of not only all the teams, but every single player. I have done all 4 major regions. A link to that will be in the iCard up in the top right corner right now. I highly implore you go check that out. We put a lot of time and effort into those videos, and it really would do me a big solid if you guys could go and check that one out. But, of course, you are here now for the Week 6 overview of these games, and there were a lot of fun ones to get into. So, let's not waste too much time. Let's jump right into our first series of the week. And our first series of the week here was FPX, FunPlus Phoenix, taking on LNG Esports. And FPX actually takes a pretty clean 2-0 series win here, which I can't speak for everybody, but I was a little bit surprised by this, by how easy it was. LNG's really started to fall off, but we'll get to that in a minute. FPX looked really, really solid in both games here, especially Game 2 was really convincing. Game 1 definitely was up in the air thanks to Tarzan kind of getting light some gold, but Game 2 was very much FPX from start to finish. Player of the series for me is going to be Clid here in the jungle. Just had complete control of the map in both games against one of the best junglers in the world. Ever since Summit has joined this FPX team, I don't know what that did for Clid, but Clid feels completely unlocked at this point. He's playing some of the best League of Legends he's played in quite a while, including last year when he went to Worlds. And I think that is a huge, huge, huge turnaround for FPX. A big reason that they were ever going to be a good team in the first place, at least in terms of roster construction, is how good Clid can be. And the fact that he can enable a lane like LWX and Hang, which I do think is one of the best in the LPL. Or Care, who has shown definitely some promise on some more supportive level picks in the mid lane. Like, to take those lanes and be able to propel them forward, I think that was always Clid's best option and his best playstyle, and he's really come into his own in the last few weeks here. As for the rest of this team, like I said, Summit joining has just changed everything. He's definitely been an upgrade over Zhao Laohu, who was just fine. He was actually not terrible, but Summit clearly offers this team more. I think they're undefeated since he's joined, which is awesome, at least in terms of series scores. And he's winning top lane a lot harder. Ale was a problem in this series. He was really, really irrelevant. He picks the Gnar into the gangplank in game 1, gets completely bodied. Then you get the Gnar picked into him. He goes for the more passive Sejuani pick, still loses that pretty hard. Really just not a good look from Ale, but Summit looking really good. And then LWX and Hang, they were playing a lot of weak side early in the year, and I think they finally realized that if you put resources into this bottom lane, they can win you the game. Like I've been saying for, what, months now? LWX and Hang are phenomenal. LWX is a teamfight god. We saw that on the Aphelios in the late game. And really, the Kalista in lane was really deadly. Kalista Pike can be a very scary lane to play into, especially as an Aphelios, where you really don't have a lot of that mobility to be able to dodge early. Obviously, you're waiting on your Gale Force in order to really be able to deal with Pike. And, you know, you can really get capitalized on in a lane that's very hyper kill focused, like Kalista Pike is. So, I really like the drafts here in general from FPX, but overall, everybody on the team playing well. Kara was also playing well. He just didn't necessarily like stand out. He had a good Sylas game in game 1. Was definitely kind of important late there, but nothing that was like overly unbelievable. Everybody on the team just kind of did their part, and they looked good for it. As for LNG, definitely not the look you wanted to see from them. Getting 0-2'd here isn't awful. Again, FPX is a very good team. I had them above them in the power rankings for a reason, but you certainly want to see this team eventually start to pick up its pace because, of course, they have Worlds aspirations, and they are clearly not hitting them right now. My dud of the series is going to go to Doenb. We've seen him pull out the Gragas mid this split already and do really well on it, and obviously he thinks it's a very strong pick right now, the full AP Gragas mid, because he's gone it a bunch, you know, the Night Harvester build with Archangels and things like that. But it just didn't work here. It was very useless. Very much went in and died immediately in both games. It just didn't accomplish much. Not to say that everybody else had good series. Like I said, Ale got pretty gapped by Summit in the top lane, and then Iwandi was not super good at support, nor has he been all year long, honestly. So, I don't know. Tarzan kind of showed up, especially in game 1. Thought he had a really good Viego game. And then Light was able to get ahead a little bit on the Xayah in game 1, but game 2 really wasn't a fun one for the Aphelios. But yeah, overall, just LNG not looking particularly great. You certainly want to see better from them. Where do I see this team wanting to turn around? I really think, I don't know at this point, because we're starting to see that this team just doesn't click. For whatever reason, adding Doenby to this team, that has changed the entire dynamic of how it has worked. We know that he's a focal point player. He's always been a focal point player his entire career. But for whatever reason, he does not mesh well with Tarzan. He does not mesh well with Awandi. The macro plays they're trying to make don't work. They're losing lane now. They're starting to get outskilled in the 1v1 and the 2v2. I really have nothing else to say. I think this team is probably closer to the spot that I had them in the power rankings at 8 or 9 than they ever probably will be to 4 or 5, which is really sad to say, but at this point, I'm starting to lose hope that LNG is going to be, a Worlds contender or even a competitive playoff team. As for FPX, they definitely are that, a Worlds contender and a competitive playoff team. It's going to be really tough. There are only 4 World spots to come out of the LPL, so and the top 4 teams look really difficult to break into, but FPX looks like an absolute monster of a unit right now. And if they can continue this, I really do believe that they could beat any of those top 4 teams on any day. So hopefully they continue that hot streak going into the rest of the season. All right, moving on to our second series here of day 1. We had JD Gaming taking on Rare Atom. A 2-1 series win for JDG to continue their hot streak of being atop the LPL standings. Rare Atom really stood no chance. Well, I shouldn't say that because the series was pretty close. Rare Atom definitely stood a chance. But, it's Rare Atom, so they threw it away. Let's talk about JDG first, though. Kanavi is really good. When I was releasing my player rankings for the LPL, I was really expecting to get some pushback for putting Kanavi as the #1 jungler in the LPL. I thought people would be a little bit more upset by that, considering he's pretty up and down. His pathing isn't always the best. And he can sometimes lose a little bit of pressure on the map in order to make aggressive plays. But no one was really upset by that, and I think that shows how far Kanavi has come just as a player in general, like how good he is now. The fact that he can, everybody just agrees that this guy is phenomenal. And he showed why in this series. In game 1 on the Poppy, he was able to facilitate everything, especially with Yagao. I should say in the mid lane, who we'll talk about, had another good series here. And then in game 3, he really took over on the Viego. His team fighting towards the end of that game there was the reason they were able to win, even in the face of Rare Atom being, pretty strong at that point in the game. But, like I said, Kanavi and Yagao have really stepped up as a jungle mid duo to really fear. This is easily Yagao's best split of his career. I stand by that statement. He has another really good series here, especially, like I said, that game 1 on Talia. A very, very good one. And he honestly had a pretty good game 2 in their loss on the Ahri. Just the rest of the team couldn't, keep them in it. And then game 3, he was really good on the Ahri as well. He just seems to be very, very consistent right now, and I really value that. Consistency, I think, is a huge deal for a team that really wants to be at the top of the standings. You have to be able to game in and game out, be one of the best teams in the region. And I think JDG does that for the most part. Yes, I think game 2 was definitely a problem. They let the Aphelios get ahead, and, the Aphelios kind of took over and was able to win that game. And yes, game 3 was very much a potential Rare Atom win towards the end there after they secured the Baron and just decided to throw it at Dragon. But still, you got to give this team some sort of credit. Hope's been very good in late game team fights. He's very good in game 3 on the Aphelios here. And then 369, I actually think was also phenomenal in this series. I want to give a big shout out to him. It was a pretty big top gap in terms of lane pressure, especially in game 1 here on the Gnar into the Gwen. Was a pretty dominant game here from 369. I think JDG is honestly just a really talented roster overall, and I think you saw that in this series. As for Rare Atom, not the worst series loss of all time. Yes, you threw it away, but honestly, the fact that you were in it against one of the best teams in the region, I think is promising. Really, a lot of that goes on to iBoy, who had probably his best series of the split so far here, especially that game 2 on Aphelios, where he was just kind of able to take over that late game. Game 1 wasn't really his game, and then the game 3 on the Jinx was just kind of whatever. He had one really good team fight, good for him. But I want to point out Leon as well, who was also pretty good here. Nobody was really that awful. I think definitely my dud of the series is Cube, because like I said earlier, he was pretty classed in the top lane, pretty much gapped by 369. Probably the hardest lane gap I could say that we had in this series. Missing and Yuyanja, I think both were kind of meh, so it was hard for me to say like one was that much better or that much worse than the other. I think both kind of had meh series, honestly, at the end of the day. But Cube was definitely worse than 369, so it was a pretty clear argument to me that Cube was probably the weak link of Rare Atom in the series. But like I said, they've got to be confident and happy that they were able to stay in this. They were able to take a game off of JDG, and then in Game 3, they were able to put themselves in a position where all they had to do was not throw in order to win, and unfortunately, they just couldn't do that. They don't know how to not do that. So, yeah, it's not the worst loss in the world for Rare Atom. Do I think this changes my outlook on this team immensely? Probably not, but it is definitely a look to see someone like iBoy actively stepping up and starting to look better than he has for most of the year. As for JDG, like I said, they're kind of, going on all cylinders. I wouldn't be too worried about the lack of cleanness in this series. I do think that it clearly could have been better for them. Obviously, losing a game to Rare Atom isn't great. Having to have that, dragon throw in Game 3 isn't great. But at the end of the day, they were able to pick up the win, and they still looked very good doing it. It's not like they looked like the worst team in any of these games. So, I don't know. I'm not going to hit the panic button on JDG at all just yet. I still think they're a very, very good top-tier team. And I don't want to worry too much just because they didn't look perfect here. Jumping into day 2 action here. We kicked off day 2 with the series between RNG and Team WE. Two pretty historic organizations here in the LPL, definitely going in opposite directions. RNG is able to take this one 2-1 in a pretty classic mid-season RNG series where they are the better team by a lot, but for some reason they dropped game 2 just because they want to, I guess. They do this all the time. They've done this every split. So let's go over what we saw here. RNG, the bot lane's really good. Gala and Ming are real good. I definitely can see where I get some feedback on Gala not being one of the best ADCs in the world, but I think this series is actually a pretty good example of why my feelings of him being, like, below Viper and Ruler, like, just below in that tier, I think are a little more valid, because in this series, you have Ming making plays all over for Gala, and he's there to clean them up. He's perfect in that respect, and he's really aggressive in that respect, but I'm not exactly sure that he would be as successful without Ming. And I don't mean that in a way of, like, he wouldn't be a top 80 carry in the world. Just that I don't know if he would be in that top tier conversation like he is now without the best support in the world, in my opinion. I would think he would be like an A tier jungler, like an A plus tier jungler. What am I talking about? An A plus tier 80 carry rather than an S tier 80 carry, if that makes sense. But that's more to say about Ming than it is about Gala. Ming has just been so genuinely phenomenal. He's my player of the series here. I feel like he's gotten that quite a few times this year already. He's been so good all year long for this RNG team. He was a big reason this team was able to take Spring. In the first place, obviously, him and Xiaohu and Wei were a huge, like, phenomenal trio. Obviously, Gala was there too. But Ming, I feel like, is the heart and soul of RNG. When he is playing like this, it is very difficult to imagine them losing. And, yeah, he had that opportunity. They're going into one of the weaker bot lanes in the LPL. Jing does come back in here for SMLZ. It did look like an upgrade in this series. SMLZ has been such a passive and, non-factor for WE pretty much the entirety of this season. To see Jing come in and actually kind of make a difference here, have a pretty good game, too, in their win, I think is promising. I would very much expect him to stay in if he can play like this the rest of the year, because SMLZ was just not offering that. And Shanks, I thought, had a pretty good series as well, especially that game 2 on the Swain. Swain's always been a pick that I like Shanks on. The game 3, not so much, but, you're going into Xiaohu. What are you going to do? Overall, I just think both teams were kind of meh in this series. Neither really showed to be unbelievable outside of Ming being really, really good. Ming and Gala were very, very good. Everybody else was kind of meh. I thought Wei had a good game 1, but his game 2 was really not good, and then his game 3 was fine. It was on the Vi. It was fine. And then Xiaohu and Breathe are fine. Breathe, I'm starting to get a little bit concerned about, because he's really come in and he's not been that good for this RNG team. Like, he certainly hasn't been what they brought him in to be, which is the #1 top laner in the LPL, like he has been for a little while now. He certainly has not been that for this team. He's definitely more of a stable, consistent presence in the top lane, and I thought that would unlock players like Wei and Xiaohu just a tad bit more to be more aggressive. But Xiaohu really hasn't been that. He's still been pretty passive in the mid lane. He still feels like he's playing with Bin in the top lane, where he knows that Bin is going to overextend and he has to be the consistent one. You're playing with a very consistent top laner now, so I would like to see Xiaohu get a little bit more involved in some like aggressive plays. Definitely some more force feeding him gold in the mid lane, but you know, it's hard to complain when you have this bot lane playing like this. I will say, just a little shout out, Amumu in game 2, you put him on the best support in the world and he does absolutely nothing. I'm gonna die on this hill, I guess, because I feel like I'm proven right every single week. But Amumu, why? I don't get the Amumu pick. It's not good. There are other picks you can pick. Don't pick Amumu. This is your heads up to pro teams that watch this series, which who knows. But Amumu, don't pick it. It ain't good. It ain't good. As for WE, I talked about it. Shanks and Jing are playing well, or at least they played well in this series. Shanks has been kind of the bright spot for this team, I think, for most of the year in general. His development has definitely come along. I think he would look better on a better team, but everything else on this team is a disaster. Heal is my dud of the series. He got support gapped incredibly hard, not only in lane, but in terms of map presence. Heal is just not it. He is not an LPL caliber support. At least he hasn't shown to be. But this team is a disaster just all around, so it's really hard to tell who exactly is the problem. I like Beishang as a player. He did not have a good one here. Biu continues to be not good, especially on the Kayle in game 1. A pick that you have to do something on, and he did nothing on. So yeah, honestly, just nothing is really looking good for WE. They look pretty lost. I think they will probably get a win at some point this year. They might be better than some of the other bottom teams. They definitely are putting up fights, but at the end of the day, like, it's just Shanks. Like, it's Shanks 1v9ing, and that's how they're going to get wins. So, we'll see if they can do it. I definitely don't think that they're going to be a team that goes on any sort of win streak. I think they're already eliminated from playoffs, so I certainly don't think that's in the conversation, but they're pretty much the Fred and Breon of the LPL if they win a game, great, but it doesn't really change much. They're not a good team, and even if they have a good player, it's not enough for me to consider them someone that is near the top, or like near the top of this bottom cluster of teams, I should say. As for RNG, I really want to see them get a little bit more clean. I dropped them down to number 4 in my power rankings last week. They're going to stay there until they can prove more, but as for now, this one is a good start. I just want to see that, I want to see those solo lanes really get unlocked. That's really the problem I'm starting to see with this team. Moving on to the second series here of day 2, we had OMG taking on Top Esports. A battle of two teams that I think have kind of been on the upswing, a little bit of a hot streak for both recently, but Top clearly proves why they are considered one of the best teams in the region, while OMG is an up-and-comer, because they were much better here. They were much, much, much better here in a lot of different ways. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's talk about what Top did right. They have the best jungle mid duo in the world. I'm pretty convinced of that. I know I said in my LCK video, Canyon and Showmaker are the best jungle mid duo ever, and I agree with that. I still think at the peak, what we've seen from Canyon and Showmaker is the best jungle mid duo of all time. But if you ask me right now who the best jungle mid duo in the world is in 2022, it is Tian and Knight, who have just been perfect together. I mean, this is a match made in heaven for both of these players, and it's unbelievable. Nobody would have expected that going into the year, but they have pretty much been the perfect jungle mid duo in terms of how they play together. Both of them have a pretty aggressive playstyle, but neither of them overextends to the point where they have to cover for each other. Very much last year, it felt like Tian was having to cover a lot for Doenby, because Doenby was making all these aggressive plays around the map, and Tian always had to be a little bit closer to the mid lane in order to make sure that Doenby's wave didn't get completely out of control. So it really limited, I think, a lot of what he was able to do. You have Knight here, who's really lane focused. You can focus on getting him ahead, and the rest of the team is also focused on getting him ahead, Mark as well. And they really, 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 really have found something good here. You could give the player of the game, or the player of the series, to either of them. I'm going to give it to Knight, because again, he was really dominant. He plays the Ori game in game 1, does a ton of damage, like an absolute metric shit ton of damage on the Orianna, and it's like, okay, whatever. And then he goes to Victor, games 2 and 3, and just completely obliterates them. He's the best player in the world. I really have a lot of faith behind that argument right now, that you give me Knight over Rookie, you give me Knight over Chovy, etc., etc. I think he is just unstoppable when he's playing right, and this is exactly what we saw. But that's not to take away from Tian, who again was amazing, especially in that game 3 on the Poppy, where he was really, really annoying. Aki stood absolutely no chance. Even on the Belveth, which I think a lot of people have been talking about it being super OP, I think we've proven in pretty much every time it's been in Pro at this point that it is very much not. It is very easy to counter, which we saw in Game 2 on the Viego for Tian. He just had full control of this matchup. Jackie Love played really well. Mark, like I said, played really well. Wayward has been a huge addition to this team in the top lane. I think he's pretty much perfect for what this team wants to do. He's very stable, someone who you don't have to baby in order to make sure that he doesn't lose matchups. He's very, very solid in the 1v1. And also doesn't, even when he's not winning, he knows how to lose gracefully. It lets Tian open up the map a little bit more. Definitely more than when they had Zoom. Overall, this top esports team is just perfect. Like, I really have nothing to say. You know, they still need to beat the top teams in the region. Like, they still need to be able to beat Victory 5. They still need to be able to beat RNG, which has been their problem. But outside of that, like, top has almost no weaknesses if they play like this. Like, this is the perfect LPL team. As for OMG, I still think they're fine. Like, obviously, losing to top isn't the biggest deal in the world. Taking game 1, I think, is a positive, especially off the back of Abel getting his Samira. Obviously, it was banned out in games 2 and 3 because you're not going to let Abel have his Samira, but it's good to see him be able to get that champ and still be able to dominate on it. It is clearly his pick. I don't imagine that OMG will be getting the Samira for the rest of the year, in the same way that they also will not be getting the Shyvana for the rest of the year. But outside of that, honestly, nobody on this team played well. Abel was really bad in the last 2 games of the series on Tristana and Ezreal. Heavily, heavily, heavily outplayed by Jackie Love and Mark. Most specifically, Mark in those last 2 games. Cold was also really bad. He's actually going to get my dud of the series here, although I feel like that could go to a few people. Cold was just kind of the one that was running it down. It was really for that game 3 on the Seraphine, which was not a good game at all from him. Cream also had a not a good series. I know I'm high on Cream. The Corki was not it. He had 2 really bad Corki games here. He is going into the best player in the world, but still, something worth noting of, I really hate it when pros just hold package forever and never use it because they're waiting for the perfect opportunity, and that perfect opportunity never comes, so they just never use it. That felt like what Cream was doing in this series. I get it, you felt like you needed the perfect engage to turn the series around, but at the end of the day, you gotta try something, and it very much felt like they were just kind of bleeding out here. And then, like I said, Aki got beat up in the jungle pathing. He wasn't awful. He didn't run it or anything like that, but he definitely was beaten up by Tian in this series. As for the outlooks of these teams, OMG's good. They're fine. Like, they're still in that range that I think they're in. I think this doesn't change much for me. And it doesn't change much for top either. This is a really, really good team showing that they're a really, really good team. And OMG still showing that they're just not quite there yet. They do have the potential to be there, but they're not there yet. And they definitely still have some room to go. They're not one of the best teams in the LPL. They're not someone who can keep up with top or anything like that. So at the end of the day, neither team I think surprises me too much here. Just a really good series from Top Esports overall. Moving on to day 3 here of LPL, week 6 action. We kicked off day 3 with a matchup between LGD Gaming and Bilibili Gaming, BLG. A battle of 2 teams that have not been very good throughout this split so far, and that is going to continue, I think, in this series. Neither team really looking super clean. BLG is thankfully going to be able to take the 2-1 series win. They are going to be very excited about finally snapping their losing streak here, but it's not like they did it in the most clean way possible. There were 2 big contributors, in my opinion, to this series. The 2 members of this team that I think were left relatively untouched throughout the split so far. Bin in the top lane and Crisp at support. I think both had pretty solid series here. I'm going to give my player of the series here to Bin, mostly because of that game 2 on the Aurelia. You put him on an aggressive pick like an Aurelia, where he can fight over and over and over again. He fought Fearness, got him out of the series, put Chalizi back in for game 3. He just dominated that game 2 on Aurelia. The lane phase was really, really difficult to deal with, and then he just snowballed out of control to the point where he could fight anybody in the game. When Bin gets ahead, we know he can win you games by himself. We saw it on Suning. We saw it on RNG last split. We're seeing it now on BLG. I still think he's probably the best player on this team, just overall. But yeah, I mean, kind of brutal. Kind of brutal outside of that. Crisp played well, I will say. Crisp had a pretty good game 3 here on the Tom Kench, was pretty much everywhere. Really helped Rise decimate this bottom lane. This bottom lane was a problem for LGD, but we'll get to that in a minute. Crisp, I thought, had a good one on the Kench. He was kind of everywhere. He seems to have, you know, a good head on his shoulders. He seems to know when to engage and when not to engage, unlike the rest of this team, which has certainly struggled with that all year long, taking really, really bad fights. That's kind of the BLG special right now. But Crisp seems to be kind of the outlier for that. He definitely seems to be the one that is engaging in a more thoughtful manner at the very least. Like, he's at least thinking about what he's doing before he's going in. But everybody else on this team is fine. You bring Can in here. He's fine. He's probably been better than Weiwei so far this year. But it's such a small sample size. Like, I don't even know. The game 3 on Viego was really good, but games 1 and 2 were not perfect. I personally like Icon in here more than Fofo. Icon loses pretty hard in game 1 to Yeji. They bring Fofo back in. He's fine. He has 2 good Azir games. That's fine. I think Fofo has been I think Icon's been better throughout the rest of this year. Fofo is really good when this team wins, and he's really bad when this team loses. He doesn't really seem to be the one that's influencing a lot of it. More so just, he's kind of a byproduct of how the rest of this team is doing. And then Rise comes in here. I didn't even really talk about it. Rise comes in here for Doggo. This is his first series in the LPL. And he looks alright. He had a lot of help this series, especially in that game 3, which was probably his best looking game. He had a lot of help from Crisp on that Tom Kench playing the Aphelios. Was able to do a lot of what he was doing essentially for free. So everybody on BLG looking alright. Not great. Bin looks really good, but outside of that, not so much. LGD just has problems. Like I said, Yeji actually had a pretty good series here, especially that game 1 on the Ahri, one of the better games that he's had all year long. I'm definitely leaning in favor of Yeji being one of this team's more productive players. Obviously, Shadow, I think, is in that conversation as well. He very much just looks like someone who's trying to do his absolute best with 3 to 4 other players who just don't really have a lot of talent going for them. Unfortunately, I was really high on Awesome. I thought when he came in, he was going to be very, very solid for this team. He was helping this team grow, but he had a bad one here. Even in their win in game 1, he wasn't so good on the Lucian, and then Jinx in game 3 was certainly the worst game of the series from anybody here. Just got abused by Crisp over and over and over again. Not a good look. Not that Jinjiao was much better. Obviously, you're flip-flopping between Fearness and Chalizi in the top lane. Nothing to really talk about there. They're both meh at best. So, outlooks of these teams, like, shout out BLG for getting the win. They're going to be happy. Yeah, they're beating LGD, which isn't exactly the biggest accomplishment in the LPL right now. But at the end of the day, a win's a win, and to snap that losing streak is definitely going to be a positive sense for that team. As for LGD, they're not good. They're in that bottom cluster, which, you know, we've known. I've had them at the top of that bottom cluster. Maybe they're not at the top of that bottom cluster. We'll definitely have to reevaluate that later when we go over the power rankings. But yeah, this was not a good look from them at all, from LGD. Awesome, a player who I've been pretty high on, was not good. He's my dud of the series. I don't think I said that. Yeji, however, has, you know, shown some more things than he should at the beginning of the year. Shadow, I think, continues to consistently be fine with a bunch of solo queue players. And then the rest of the team's a little disappointing. And then for BLG, it's Bin and Crisp versus the world. Hopefully Can come in and be good. Or hopefully Rise can come in and be good. You're kind of just hoping that these LDL players are good because your LPL players have not been. They've certainly not been good enough. So at this point, you're just hoping and praying. They looked fine in the series. We'll have to see how they hold up against a better team than LGD, though, because, yeah, if they're going to look just okay against this team, I can't imagine how they're going to look against some of the playoff contenders. Jumping into the second series here of day 3, we had Edward Gaming taking on Ultra Prime, a 2-0 series win for EDG that they desperately, desperately needed after they really started to show signs of being very inconsistent over the course of last week. They take both Game 1 and Game 2 in pretty convincing fashion, especially Game 2, off the back of their 2 big carry roles here, kind of really stepping up, mainly Viper being Viper, and he's kind of been the one member of this EDG team that I've talked about all year long that has continued to maintain his form from last year. Obviously, Viper was probably the best player in the world last year, or definitely one of the best players in the world last year, and he's continued to be one of the better players in the world this year. He's still in that top tier of 80 carries, whether you want to put him above Ruler or whatever, you know, you can say what you want, but you know, he's still phenomenal, right? Like, those are the top 2 in the world, in my opinion. It's really hard to dispute that. And he shows why in this series. Yes, he's playing the Senna, but, like, this is how you play Senna. This is how you play Senna, like, aggressively. I'm really happy to see him take over this, like, strategy of We know fasting Senna is there, but I think the optimal way we've learned to play Senna is like half and half. Is, you know, AD carry, the Senna getting half the farm, the support getting half the farm. You're still going to get the support super far ahead because of that, but you're not sacrificing the AD carry too much. You're actually still getting Senna a lot of gold for that. So I really like that idea just in general of half and half farming. I think we've seen that pretty much in every region that works. And Viper pulled it out here, and that's a big reason why he's going to be my player of the series for this series here. Another player that played really, really well was Scout in the mid lane here, who actually had probably one of his best series in a while. He's someone I've been pretty hard on throughout the year so far. Him and Mako have definitely, in my opinion, been pretty disappointing so far in 2022. But Scout was able to pretty much take advantage of Cryan in this series. Certainly a matchup that we've seen Scout win a lot before. And, you know, we definitely saw that again. That game 1 on the Azir was very scary. He was very dominant towards the end of that game. Big reason they were able to close it out. Not that they were ever really in danger, but close it out as quickly as they did was because of Scout being able to just obliterate the enemy team over and over and over again. Yeah, Flandre in the top lane, who I kind of like the build. I think a lot of people are going to criticize the build here, but I kind of like Ravenous Hydra on Gangplank when you're going into something like a Sejuani here in game 2. You're not really going to be outputting a lot of damage against this comp here. Going into Sedge, going into Rek'Sai, going into Swain, it's going to be really hard for crit to actually matter. Like, your damage is really going to be, it's going to be negligible at that point in the game. So to build something like Ravenous Hydra, be a little bit more tanky, be a little bit more utility, I actually quite like that decision here from Flandre, and I definitely think it paid off in game 2. But yeah, honestly, EDG still firing on all cylinders. I still think Mako has some stuff to prove. He played better in this series. Game 1 was a question mark here on the Tahm Kench. He played much better in game 2 once Ultra Prime switched out some bot lane members, but we'll get to that. Just overall, I think EDG has some room to grow. As for Ultra Prime, though, this team's not good. Like, they've completely fallen off a cliff from whatever potential we thought they had. They are a bottom-tier team now. There is no other way to explain it. They're not good. They have some wins here against some bottom-tier teams, but yes, they're probably at the top of that bottom tier, but outside of that, no. Their solo laners have really let them down. Cryan is going to be my dud of the series here. He just got completely outplayed here by Scout, especially in that game 1, but he was also pretty useless in that game 2 on the Swain again. 2 Swain games that I definitely don't think Cryan is going to want to remember here. Probably 2 of his worst games on Ultra Prime so far this year. And then Zoom continues to be a massive disappointment. I've rarely seen a Sejuani get caught out as much as Zoom got caught out in this series. It is really difficult for a Sedge to be such a problem, like to be a huge negative for the team, but he absolutely was. He had an alright game 1, which is the reason that he doesn't get the dud of the series here, but the game 2 was probably the worst game that anybody on Ultra Prime had this series. You're swapping out supports here. You start with Xiaoxi, and then you switch it up in game 2, and you go to Meow Meow. I believe that's how you say it. And neither looked good. Meow Meow got completely abused here by Viper and Mako in game 2. He looked much worse than Xiaoxi, who has certainly been a problem for this Ultra Prime team so far this year. So I don't know what to tell you. Hopefully they can figure that out. Elk is unfortunately stuck here in Elo Hell. He continues to not look good, but I think I stand by the fact that I think a lot of that is the team that is surrounding him just not being good at all. Hacker has not been good this year. He wasn't the problem in this series. Really, it was top and mid, and then a little bit of support. But yeah, overall, for the outlooks of these teams, Ultra Prime is not good. They're just not good. If Zoom continues to be one of the worst top laners in the LPL, and if Cryan is kind of on this downward trend where, you know, as this team continues to just lose and lose and lose, they just lose confidence over and over again, you know, and Hacker continues to be the worst jungler in the LPL, you have a support situation that has been tragically bad here. Even if Elk, I think, is a good player, like, if that's your outlook, you're a bottom team. Period, end of story. So, really, really tough break for Ultra Prime, who I thought had some potential going into the year. But EDG continues to be that team that I think will probably be the cusp, right? I think they're right there with Weibo as the team that is probably going to beat a lot of the teams that are bad, but isn't really ever going to be in conversation for a Worlds contention spot, at least unless they fill a lot of the holes that are plaguing the problems that this team has. Mako has been a problem for this team. He was fine in this series, but again, it's against a horrible support duo, or like a bad 2 supports. In his game 1, he wasn't even perfect. Flandre has continued to not really matter in the top lane. He was much better in this series, and I think he's showing a proactivity at least here on Gangplank, but JJ continues to be fine. Scout has definitely he had a good one here. That's good to see. Viper continues to be the saving grace of this team. But, you know, the outlook of this EDG team, I think, stays the same. They're a mid-table playoff team that will probably gatekeep a lot of the bottom teams out of the playoffs. But, yeah, I don't think they're on the same level as RNG or JDG. Definitely not a Victory 5 and top esports. So, they're going to be happy to grab their win here. It's not the end of the world or anything for EDG. Obviously, a win is a win. They go to 6-3. It's a good record. It's just they're not exactly showing world beater qualities on the Rift. That's going to bring us to day 4 here of Week 6 LPL action. We kicked off day 4 with a series between Anyone's Legend and ThunderTalk Gaming. Anyone's Legend is going to be able to take this 2-1, continuing their very surprise climb to the top of the LPL standings. A very good win here, and against a team that I think really showed a lot with their new bot lane last week in ThunderTalk, and again, I thought had a pretty decent series here, just not a great one. A pretty good one, if you will. Let's talk about Anyone's Legend. Xiaohao is really good. It's honestly becoming a little bit more than I expected at this point. This is no longer a mid-tier LPL jungler, in my opinion. He is above being a good LPL jungler. He is a really good LPL jungler. He's proven that. He's proven that he's able to beat a lot of the junglers that I would consider better than him at the beginning of the year. And maybe my ranking for him was too low, because he has been very, very good for this Anyone's Legend team. Him and Chocho have been the driving force for AL this entire year, and both of them are having phenomenal splits. I think both of them should be getting the credit that they deserve for being as good as they are, and both of them were, again, very, very good in this series on some picks that I think we've seen people struggle with in pretty much every region. We've seen people struggle with the Lee Sin. I just got finished earlier in the video talking about how I don't like the Amumu pick. But Xiaohao and Chocho make these picks look super good because they are very good players, and that is what it takes. You have to be better to make these picks look like they are worth it. And he absolutely did. Even in the games that they lost, that game 2 here, which was a very close game 2, Xiaohao was the reason that they were in that game. He was phenomenal on Lee Sin in that one, and just they weren't able to pick it up at the end there. But yeah, he's looked really good. Like I said, Chocho has looked really good, especially on these engage, aggressive picks that can really set someone like Betty or Forge up to carry the game. Forge on the Akali in game 2 was fine. ZDZ had a phenomenal game 3 on the Camille. Definitely worth pointing out there. A pick we don't see very often in Pro right now. Camille's not very strong in that, Camille doesn't really do either of the roles that she wants to do better than anybody else. She's not the best team fighter right now. That is definitely the tanks. And she's certainly not the best split pusher right now. And so it's really difficult to find a reason to pick her unless you're really, really good at her. And ZDZ is clearly really, really good at her because he had a phenomenal game 3 on her. Just in general, Anyone's Legend's looking complete, as a team. I know it's against ThunderTalk, it's not perfect, but to me, they've pretty much clinched playoffs in terms of mentality. I know their schedule's going to get a lot harder coming up, and that'll really be the test to see whether or not they're going to be a playoff team. But for me, they're going to be in that range of 7 to 10. They're going to make playoffs. They're probably going to be an early exit, but I still think that's a plus from what they probably expected going into the year. As for ThunderTalk, I don't think that this roster is completely inept. I actually think some of the changes made here are positives for this team. I've talked about the bot lane coming in here being an upgrade for them. I still feel like that is true, even though, as you can see, I'm giving Kepler my dud of the series here. He wasn't very good in games 1 and 3. Just really, really passive. The Jinx is not a pick that I really recommend right now. Not that it's awful, just I think you're going to get a lot of value elsewhere. I know obviously they had a lot of ADCs banned out, but I think you're going to get a lot of value elsewhere. And then the Aphelios into Kalista matchup is just so bad for Aphelios that it's really hard for me to say that that is a particularly great pick here in game 3. So he unfortunately is going to get my dud of the series here, but who definitely does not get my dud of the series for ThunderTalk is Yao Yao, who continues to show that he's one of the up-and-coming good, interesting supports, I'll say, in the LPL. A very, very interesting addition here. Definitely better than Southwind. Again, Kepler's been better than Puff, I should say that as well, but Yao Yao continues to be interesting. The game 2 on the Amumu, the Kalista Amumu lane, which we've seen, was really, really good. Like I said, I think you need a certain level of macro game knowledge to be able to pull Amumu off right now, because if you go in at the wrong time, you're baiting your team into death. And I certainly think when it works like this. And It's really good to see a young player like Yao Yao be able to come into the LPL and be solid. UCal didn't have a particularly great series. I know a lot of people are shit-talking him. I actually thought he had a pretty decent Silas game in Game 2. Yes, I'm very confused about the build in Game 3 on the Seraphine as well. The Crown into Rylai's into Chemtrek Putrefier, like, where's the damage? I know you're relying on Aphelios here, but you are your only source of AP, and you're just really not going to do much. Don't love the build at all here from UCal, but at the end of the day, I definitely think he's looked better in the last few weeks than he looked at the beginning of the season. Hoya was not so good in this one. They did play him for the full series, so that's something. You know, good on him. He gets a full series worth of games in, but outside of that, he certainly didn't look great. And then Beishuan, you know, he's kind of been carrying this team when they were bad. He's taken a little bit of a step back, I think, as this team's progressed a little bit better. Not to say he's been bad at all, just that he got out-jungled here by Xiao Hao. He was definitely on the back foot, I think, for most of the series. Even if he wasn't exactly inting, he never really had control. Even in the game that they won, I would say Xiao Hao was definitely the better jungler. So, outlooks for both of these teams. ThunderTalk is fine. They're probably where I have them now, somewhere like right outside playoffs in that like 11 to 13, 14 range. They're a good team that I think can compete with some teams that are above them in the standings, can put up a fight, but probably not enough to secure them a playoff spot. But definitely you've learned that you have some young guns here that are worth investing in Kepler and Yao Yao. And Beishuan, I think, continues to be a good player. And so if you can just continue their development, I think that's a good thing. As for anyone's legend, I mean, like I said earlier, you're surpassing any expectations that I think anyone had for this team going into Summer Split. So as long as you can make playoffs, which right now is looking like a good bet, I think they're going to be very, very, very happy with how they're playing. Jumping into the second series here of Day 4, we had Victory 5 taking on Invictus Gaming. A Victory 5 win as they continue their undefeated run here in the LPL. And Rookie's back. That's all I can really say. Rookie is back. He has been completely and utterly dominant since coming back here to Victory 5. I know I talked about Knight earlier in the video here about him being like my best player in the world, and I stand by that. I think Knight is the best player in the world. But the difference between Knight, Chovy, and Rookie is so slim. Like, those to me are so clearly the three best players in the world right now that I really just, I want to make that point clear. I certainly don't think, just because I think Knight's the best player in the LPL doesn't mean I think that Rookie is far behind. And this is why. Because look at this performance. He's really come back and been just completely dominant. The Silas game in Game 1, disgusting. The Swain game in Game 2, unkillable. Like, genuinely unkillable. Really just a phenomenal performance from a phenomenal player. This team is pretty much worlds bound at this point. I don't know if they've officially locked playoffs, but at this point, if they're not one of the best teams in the world, like, I don't know what is. You know what I mean? They choked it out a little bit in playoffs last year, losing to top Esports, who, you know, they probably could have beaten, and they also probably could have beaten RNG in the playoffs. You know, you could talk about that all you want. Hopefully they don't do that again, because I'd really like this team to be the #1 rep for LPL going in. Rookie was phenomenal this series. Photic was great this series. I got a lot of pushback for having Photic so low in my player rankings. I certainly agree with a lot of the points that were made in the fact that I think Photic is a team-fighting god. I think he really is a great team fighter. He certainly has some laning to get better at. I mean, this is a tough series to talk about because he's going into the worst bot lane in the LPL so far this year in On and Wink, which I've talked about multiple times on this channel. But I think a lot of people are forgetting about Photic's 2022 like playoff run, which I think a lot of people are just like, oh, he was really bad into Jackie Love and top esports. Like, he just was not on that level. I want to see it in the playoffs. I want to see it in big moments. That's really all I'm going to say on the Photic situation. PP God is still one of the best players in the LPL. He was my player of the week last week for a reason. He's awesome. The only player I think on this team who disappointed in this series was Rich, who did get a little bit outplayed by Zika, I think, for a majority of these laning phases. Obviously, Rich's problem has always been his laning phases coming over from Heroes of the Storm. He really is a great team fighter that doesn't really do much else for this team. But he's gotten better in laning phase, just this was not a series to prove that, especially that Game 1 on Aurelia. He was not good in that one. So, moving on to Invictus. This team is just a disaster, isn't it? Like, June gets so far ahead in Game 1 on the Nidalee. He's like 6-0 really early on, and they just can't do anything about it because it's Nidalee. And at that point, Nidalee just completely falls off the face of the map. So poor Jun just has to watch his lead go by, like, slowly over the course of the game. Nobody else on this team has any sort of agency. Like I said, Zika was alright in the top lane, especially in laning phase, but at the end of the day, like, this bot lane is so bad. I should note, Mole comes in here for Uakai. Not really sure if that's an upgrade. Mole is somebody who I've liked in the past, but he hasn't played in quite a while. Uakai is someone who I think has upside, but he really has not shown it in the LPL so far this year. You know, that's whatever. As for On and Wink, blah, why are they playing them? I've talked about this on the channel so much. Both of them are bad. Like, Wink has been the worst player in the LPL. I think you would really make the argument for that so far in 2022 Summer Split. On has not been much better, and neither of them are a support. Like, Wink is an AD carry player. He has been his entire career. He role swaps here to support to get On in the lineup, and it's not like Wink is a good support. He's been much worse at support than he was at AD carry, and he was a bad AD carry. And so, whatever the problem is with Ke in the LDL right now, or even Xin Lu, who hasn't been great this year, but he's been better than this, like, I don't know what to tell you. They need to figure it out, because this bot lane is just going to keep losing them series over and over and over again until they figure it out. On is my dud of the series here. Was not so good, but, you know, if there is positives to take away here, it's Jun is still a really good player who is definitely hard stuck on this Invictus gaming team. Probably one of the most hard stuck players in the LPL. I've talked about Elk as well. I definitely think Jun's in that conversation of just a player that deserves much better than what he has been given as a teammate around him. Zika also has definitely shown some promise here. His laning against Rich was certainly not bad. I don't think he's nearly the caliber of player that Jun is, though, it's just really sad to watch him get stuck here, you know, overall. But as for the outlook of these two teams, Invictus Gaming sucks, and Victory 5 is awesome. Like, there's really not a lot for me to say here. Victory 5 is probably the best team in the LPL, one of the best teams in the world. Invictus Gaming is one of the worst teams in the LPL. And that really is it, right? Like, this is the outcome that you would have expected when these two teams faced off, so my expectation for both of these teams hasn't really changed at all because of it. So, you know, congrats to Victory 5 for the win, but, you know, it's business as usual for this team. Jumping into day 5 here of Week 6 LPL action, we had Team WE taking on JD Gaming. And it's kind of a similar matchup here to what we just saw. A top team taking on a much lower team, a bottom tier team, if you will. Doesn't get much lower than what WE is right now. But this one isn't quite as clean, in my opinion. JDG definitely showing a little bit more fooling around, I'd say, in this one than maybe Victory 5 did. But let's go over what JDG did well, and that's 369. 369 has emerged this split. I don't really know what else to say about it. He was really good in spring, too, but especially here in summer. This is somebody who has been kind of alright, like, at best. Not alright at best. He's been really good at best in his career. He's never really been the guy who you feel like you can be a focal point on a Worlds caliber team. He is playing like that so far in 2022. His Kennen, we've known that that is his go-to signature #1 pick. But man, the Gnar so far in summer has also been pretty uncounterable. Obviously, the Sejuani into Gnar matchup is pretty Sejuani favored. Gnar typically can't do too much in lane, and Sejuani will outscale tank-wise. But when 369 plays Gnar, it almost doesn't matter. He is that good. He is my player of the series here. He was really genuinely phenomenal for this JDG team. But that's not to say everybody else on this team didn't do their part. Hope and Missing in the bottom lane were also really good, taking advantage of one of the weaker lanes in all of the LPL here. Xing and Kadaya. Kadaya obviously coming back in for Heal after a really rough series from Heal earlier in the week. But Hope and Missing kind of really stepping up here to Kalista games. Kalista, I think, is a really strong pick in the hands of a good ADC player. I know we've been seeing a lot of Kalista being bait, especially from Western fans, because I think we're not exactly seeing Kalista being played optimally in those regions, but yeah, I think when you look at Kalista in this series, like, this is how you play it. Incredibly lane dominant. You pair it up with something that can really go hard in. The set is great. The Nautilus is great. Obviously, we've seen it with the Mumu as well, and that have been, you know, that is really good. I honestly think Hope and Missing played this really well. They had 2 winning matchups, especially in New Aphelios. It's just really solid. Kanavi and Yagao, the 2 main players that this team has kind of been relying on most of the year, honestly took a little bit of a back seat in this series, which I think is a huge positive sign for JDG. because you never want to be that team that relies on your best players to win if you want to be a world contender, right? A world finals contender. You need to have everybody on the team, or at least multiple players on the team, be able to step up if your star player isn't having the best game of all time. And I think we're really starting to see that out of this JD Gaming team. Even if Kanavi isn't having a perfect series, which honestly he was still pretty good in this one, it's just the Belveth game wasn't perfect. Or even if Yagao is on these like more passive picks where he really isn't going to be able to take over the game, a lot closer to what we've seen from Yagao for the rest of his career, you can have a guy like 369, or you can have Hope and Missing be the focal points for this JDG team, and you still feel comfortable about winning the series, which is a huge plus. So, big for JDG there. As for WE, they suck. There's really no other way to put it. They cannot get their first win of the year here. Like I said, Kadaya comes in for heal. I don't really care. They're both bad at this point. I don't think you're really going to find an answer to that bot lane in-house this year. You're really going to have to look somewhere else in 2023. This year is pretty much over for this roster as it is now. I think Shanks and Beishang continue to be fine. Beishang actually I thought was okay here, especially in Game 2. He actually did pretty well into the Belveth on Kanavi. Like I said, that wasn't a great game for Kanavi, and I think Beishang was a big reason for that. He's someone who I definitely think has fallen off a bit since being one of the better junglers in 2020. And then, of course, he still had a pretty good year in 2021, being, what, one game away from Worlds last year? So, definitely a tough break for him to be on this really bad team now. Him and Shanks, obviously, together. But his form's taken a little bit of a step back. I think this was a good sign to see him be able to play well into, in my opinion, the best jungler in the region. But really, the dud of the series here is going to have to go to Biu in the top lane, who just got completely obliterated by 369. Really outclassed, especially in that game 2. Like I said, 369 was doing anything he wanted on that Gnar. Sejuani is usually a counter to that, but Biu got obliterated on the Sejuani. Could do absolutely nothing into that lane. So, big credit into 369. Biu continues to look like one of the worst players in the LPL because he's Feast or Famine and he's on a bad team. And Feast or Famine players on bad teams are going to look bad. That's a circle of life. So, yeah, honestly, team outlook-wise, WE is bad. They're the worst team in the LPL. JDG is good. It's very similar to what I was just talking about with Victory 5 and Invictus Gaming, where this is one of the best teams in the league versus one of the worst teams in the league. This result is pretty much exactly what I expected. Yes, Game 2 was a little bit close because Beishang was actually having a pretty good game. He made it close. Shanks was doing all right there on the Taliyah. But at the end of the day, JDG was still able to pull out the win. 369 was still able to win those team fights late. Hope was able to do a lot of damage on the Kalista. And JDG walks out of here with the 2-0, and I think they're going to be happy with that. WE is obviously going to be not happy with how their season's going, but doesn't feel like there's much that they can change. This really is just kind of the result everyone was expecting. Moving on to our second series here of Day 5, we had RNG taking on LNG Esports. An RNG win, 2-1. A little bit close, but honestly, not really. Even the game 2 that LNG won wasn't particularly like dominant or anything like that. So let's go ahead and talk about RNG being able to dismantle an LNG team that is very quickly falling apart. RNG just looked good. There's really no other way to put it. All their players looked good. Bot lane continues to be the focal point for RNG, which I think is a relatively sound strategy. Not to say that Xiaohu didn't do his due diligence here on the Taliyah, especially in Game 1, but obviously Gala with the pentakill in Game 1. Everybody freaking out. Congrats for Gala on that. And Ming kind of taking over this entire series. I think you could really give player of the series to quite a few people. For me, it is going to go to Ming. I think Ming was really, really phenomenal. He was the go button in all of these comps. Leona Game 1, Leona Game 3, even the Ashe in Game 2 I thought was relatively interesting. The bot lane certainly didn't lose super hard in Game 2. They just weren't able to kind of get ahead. Light was able to kind of snowball, and then Tarzan had a really, really, really good game on his signature Poppy pick. But we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to LNG in a minute. Let's talk about RNG. The bot lane continues to be one of the best in the world. Ming's go buttons are really, really smart. I think that's really where this team is at its best, is when Ming is on a Leona, a Nautilus, something like that, where he can just be like, all right, we're going now. And the rest of the team is able to follow up. You have the Wukong or the Vi or something. You have the Taliyah to create separation. You have a super big hyper carry like a Jinx or an Aphelios in the back. Like, I really think that that is a good strategy for RNG, and it's worked against some of the better teams in the league as well. Obviously, it worked quite well at MSI, which we saw, but yeah, really, I think this entire team runs through Ming, and it's the reason why I consider him to be the best support in the world right now. As for the rest of the team, Xiaohu, like I said, had a really, really good series here, especially the game 1 on the Tilia was very, very strong, was able to really control the map, was just better than Doenby for the pretty much entirety of the series, even in the game that they lost. He had a rough game on Tilia in game 2, but even then, I don't think Doenby really, like, outplayed him. It was more Xiaohu just taking a lot of risks and them not necessarily paying off, but yeah, I thought Wei had a really good series as well, especially that game 3 on the Viego, able to take over those fights in the late game. Viego's a really important pick if you can get it ahead, and I'm just not sold by the Lee Sin. Obviously, I know he had the Poppy banned out. That's the pick that they really want to go to here for LNG, but at the same time, there's gotta be something else, because it really feels like Tarzan is on Poppy or he's losing, and that's not a good situation for them right now. But we do have a couple roster changes to talk about for LNG. Lumao coming in for Awandi. Obviously, they've been swapping out playing time all year long. It's not really a big surprise, but the big one is in the top lane. Ale is out. Panda C is in, which is an incredibly interesting decision. I know a lot of people have been complaining that Ale has been one of the better players on LNG so far this year. I certainly haven't seen that. Not to say that he's been bad, but he certainly hasn't been good. He's kind of just been there. He's made his mistakes. He's definitely been better in recent weeks, I will say, but to say that he's been good over the summer split, I think would be misremembering a lot of the facts that have been, the problems that LNG has been presented with. Panda C comes in. Unfortunately, Panda C is much worse. This guy's like the sub-LDL top laner. I'm not really sure exactly why he was chosen to come up and play in the LPL. He clearly isn't good enough, and he clearly wasn't ready. He got pretty much brutalized in every game in the series, especially in the game that they won on the Gnar, which is certainly something. Definitely a weird turn of events there, but Tarzan continues to look good on the Poppy and on nothing else. So there's that. Light had a really good game too on the Aphelios, and Doenby continues to struggle. He's had a rough couple of weeks. He was really good at the start of Summer Split, but he was kind of bad for Spring. Not bad, he was just kind of very inconsistent over Spring, and he has these games where he's just not good. Him and Tarzan do not have any sort of synergy together. When this team wins, it is usually because Doenby or Tarzan are just mechanically really skilled and have decent macro on their own and aren't linking up or aren't trying to link up for a bunch of plays. And that does not spell success for a top team in the LPL when you're jungle mid that you've kind of built this entire roster around. Don't have a lot of synergy and are better off not linking up. I definitely don't think that that is a good sign, but that definitely feels like where LNG is at this point. So that's definitely something to be concerned about. Outlooks of these teams, LNG is a lower tier playoff team. I think of them very similar in, where I think of like EDG right now as a team that's like, oh, they absolutely should be better, but honestly, they're just not. They are just not good enough at this point. And these roster changes, reek of panic and reek of freaking out over not being able to compete at a high level. And I really don't know if they have the talent and the players right now to be able to do that. As for RNG, a really good week for them. They needed this 2-0 week. After a couple of rough weeks back-to-back losing to some of the top teams. This is definitely confidence re-inspiring, I think, for RNG here, and they're definitely going to take that. The bot lane continues to be super strong. Wei and Xiaohu continue to have good synergy. Breathe continues to be a constant in the top lane. Honestly, they continue to be a good team. I'm not sure that they're the best team in the LPL or anything like that, but they are a very, very, very good team, and they've looked to, solidify a lot of the kinks that they had coming out of MSI. All right, moving on to day 6 here. We kick off with a game that certainly has some controversy attached to it. We're talking about, of course, Bilibili Gaming taking on Rare Atom here in a series that it's hard to talk about. I'll talk about games 1 and 2, and then we'll get to the big elephant in the room for game 3. But game 1, RA goes RA's way, is very, very close back and forth game. Weibo is able to do a lot in those team fights as Aphelios late, and they are able to pull out the win. Game 2, much, much more BLG's favor. Definitely a not as close, in my opinion. Icon with a really good game here on the Azir after being subbed in for Fofo in game 1. Ben also really good on the Gwen. Definitely worth noting there as well. And then game 3 happened. Game 3 happened. So BLG gets out to a lead. Rare Atom starts to come back. They get Baron buff. They go for this big team fight. Oops! All disconnect. 5 members of the team disconnect. They get wiped. 2 members die here. They lose 2 Baron buffs. And BLG takes 2 towers. And there's no chrono break. Huh? Like, what? What? I'm sorry. I don't get this. I don't get this under any circumstance. How an entire team can disconnect. You can lose a team fight because of it. You lose 2 towers because of it. And there's no chrono break, but owner smites twice. And we have to go back 3 minutes. I don't get it, man. Like, this felt... I'm not saying it's rigged, but what I'm saying is we've seen match fixing in China before with Bilibili Gaming, specifically. So I'm not exactly saying it's not possible. I'll cover the series as if that never happened, but, you know, it's worth noting that that's a huge part of the narrative of what happened here in this game. Rare Adam very much had a chance to win that Game 3, but certainly that took away every opportunity they had. Player of the series for me is going to be Bin. He continues to be the bright spot of BLG, while everybody else in this team is pretty much a pretty giant disappointment. Not to say that Khan or Icon or Rise or Crisp aren't, like, good players, but they're not playoff players right now. Like, this is not a playoff team. Bin continues to look like the only player on this team that wants to make playoffs consistently every game. And, you know, it's good for them, but it sucks for everybody else because, like this team had the expectation of, you bring in Uzi, you have Weibo here, you bring in Fofo, who's one of the best, you bring in Crisp, who is one of the best in his role, you bring in Bin here in favor of Breathe, who Breathe was a big acquisition, Bin is a big acquisition, he just won MSI. Like, this team very much wanted to make Worlds, and they might not even make playoffs. They don't particularly look great in this series. Really, it's just Bin continuing to be really good. Icon had that really good game too on the Azir, and outside of that, they're just fine. Right there, fine. For Rare Adam, honestly, they played relatively well. iBoy had probably the best week of his split so far. Even though they went 0-2 this week, he was kind of a big factor in the 2 wins that they did grab throughout the week. So good for him. Strive continues to just be there. He's a good player. I think he would look better on a good team, but he continues to just exist. Leon is my dud of the series here. He actually had some good games. His Game 1 and Game 3 were all right, but really his Game 2 was the worst game anybody had in this series on the Xin Zhao. He was just going in and dying over and over and over and over again. So for me, he's going to get the dud of the series because it was kind of hard to assign one in this series. Nobody was particularly worse than the rest. I think everybody was just kind of not good. Like, these are 2 teams that are just not playoff teams playing against each other, so... for me, it goes to the worst the worst single game, which was Leon's Game 2. But nobody else on the team was particularly great. As for the outlooks of these 2 teams, I talked about it earlier in the week for both of them. Neither of them really deserve to make playoffs. Rare Adam certainly doesn't, and I really don't think that they're even going to be close. They're kind of mid to bottom tier of that bottom tier in itself, right? Like, they're not even at the top of the bottom tier, in my opinion. So, definitely not a lot of positive outlook to look on this Rare Adam team. But for Bilibili, like, again... You string together a 2-0 week here. That's a positive. You're back to 4-6. You're kind of within striking distance again. You know, maybe you don't feel like you're in a position to be a good team right now, but you're in a position where if you figure that out, you still have an opportunity to make playoffs. So they're going to be happy with picking up the win here, even if it was under dubious circumstances. Bin continues to carry this team. The mid lane continues to be up and down, and everybody else, you're just kind of getting game-to-game performances on. But for BLG, you're hoping this is the start of something better. Hopefully the schedule allows them to be a little bit more proactive, but yeah, right now it's not like they look like a playoff team right now. They still have to grow into that. This is just a good start to get to that point. All right, moving on to our second series here of day 6. We had a battle of 2 teams that expect to be in Worlds conversations. EDG, Edward Gaming, taking on Top Esports. Top Esports with the win here, continuing to prove that they are one of the best teams in the world over and over and over again. Again, due to this jungle mid duo being so scary, not only, you know, just by themselves, but for the rest of the map as well, in terms of global pressure. Tion has been so freaking good for this Top Esports team. You can make a real... I know I talked about Kanavi being the best jungler in the region so far this year, and I certainly think that that is definitely an argument you can make, but Tion is also right there in that conversation. He's been so good for Top Esports. Like I said, him and Knight have essentially perfect synergy. And it really comes out here. Tion is my player of the series. He takes over this one. The map was his in games 2 and 3, pretty much alone by himself. So, big shout out to Tion. He's doing really, really, really well. Definitely having arguably one of the best splits of his career. And yeah, that's a former world champion that I'm saying that about. So, Jackie Love continues to be really, really good on this team as well. He had a very good game 3 here on the Aphelios. A pick where he usually can sometimes get a little too over-aggressive. We've seen him have some trouble on that pick in the past, but he really seems to have reeled himself in terms of aggressive flashing and putting himself in bad situations. He really is just amazing damage output at this point in his career. Not to say he still doesn't make some of those mistakes, but he's reeled them in, and he's let Tion and Knight kind of be the big carries of this team. Wayward has some really good laning phases. You could argue that his builds aren't ideal. Sorry, I was looking for the word there. You could argue that his builds aren't perfect. I know a lot of people really don't like the Triforce into Chainsword into like Cyrilda's build. I don't think it's that bad. I think it's certainly not optimal, especially if you're going to play into Gnar, where I think it's probably just better to go full crit at that point, but whatever, you can say what you want. I honestly think this TES team is just good enough where they can do a lot of different things. They're probably one of the more talented teams in the world. You could talk about Victory 5 being better than them, right? But I'm not sure TES is probably the most talented team, I think, in the LPL, at least for my money. As for EDG, they continue to be this back and forth team that's going to beat the bad teams and lose to the good ones. They were able to take game 1 off the back of Flandre's Vladimir. Obviously a pick that he's been known for quite a while. Some Poppy picks coming out from JJ. I love Poppy. That's a pick I can always get behind. But the team really couldn't hold up outside of that. They were really kind of bad in games 2 and 3, especially the two players that I think I've criticized the most so far this year, Scout and Mako, who continue to have a rough series here. Scout with a pretty poor game 2 here on the Zoe, pretty much just outclassed by Tion and Knight at every level. And then Mako, just a not good game on either the Tahm Kench or the Nautilus at any point in this series. Really was just disappointing. Mako continues to be probably the biggest disappointment of the split for me. He's my dud of the series here. He goes from someone who I would have considered one of the best supports in the world last year, obviously on a super dominant bot lane, to really being the weak link of EDG so far this year, which is really, really sad to say, but him and Scout certainly have not turned up all year long. Definitely disappointing to see. But it is good to see Flandre actually play a good game here of Vladimir. He's another player who I think has definitely been disappointing this year for this team. I will say his game 3 on the Gnar was bad. The team fighting, man, come on. You have to be better. You have to be better than that. And it is what it is. Obviously, you hope that he can get back to where he was last year, but it just doesn't really seem like this team has that in them anymore. Mako's regressed, Scout's regressed, Flandre's regressed. JJ had a really good start to the split, and he's kind of gone back. Viper is really the only player on this team that I think is still playing at the level of a world championship contender, but that's not enough. You need more than an 80 carry to be a world's team coming out of the LPL. So, as for the outlook of these two teams, EDG is somewhere around, 6 to 9, right? They're somewhere in that range of they're a good team, they're a playoff team, but they're not really I don't expect them to make a lot of noise. I expect them to be able to beat their lower tier competition in the first round and then get knocked out by the team that is better than them in the next one. You know what I mean? So I don't really have a lot of expectations for this team. They really just don't have any sort of macro, any sort of cohesion. A lot of their players have taken mechanical step backs. I really am not excited about EDG right now, but I am excited about TES. They continue to look like one of the more interesting teams in the world. I really do believe they can beat anyone on any day. With the combination of Tion and Knight, I really don't think any game is off limits for them. If Jackie Love is on, if Wayward continues to play well, Mark continues to play well, this team is one of the best in the world, a world championship contender, and I think that they will probably maintain that up until, the end of the year, really, unless they hit a random cold streak, which, honestly, at this point, I know they're finicky up and down, but at this point, I doubt it. They're too good. They are too good to hit that. All right, that's going to bring us to our 7th and final day of LPL action. Of course, the Super Day here in the LPL. We've got 9 games to cover for the Super Day, which I think has been every single Super Day this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, or this split. I think every single 3-series day has been 7 or 9 games, which is absurd. But, yeah, going into day 7 here, we kick it off with OMG taking on FunPlus Phoenix here, and OMG actually picking up a pretty shocking win here. Maybe a little bit surprising. It shouldn't be, though, because, man, OMG has continued to grow and grow throughout this split. And, we saw it a little bit in spring, but we're really, really now seeing it in summer. They have some really good young players, so let's talk about them. The solo laners, actually the laners in general, are really the 3 players on this team that I think you really start talking about as potential superstars, right? The trio of Shanji, Cream, and Abel is incredibly good. It is an incredibly good trio, and they showed why in this series. My player of the series for me is going to go to Cream for that Akali game 2, which I thought was the best game of any of them, but I feel like you could give it to any of the 3. You could give it to Shanji for his game 2 here on the Gwen, which was super good here, and he had a really, really strong Game 3 on the Gangplank, just beating out Summit. And then you also have Abel here, especially in his Game 3 on the Aphelios, was really a big reason why they were able to win that game in general. All three of them have been really, really phenomenal so far this split, and I really don't expect that to stop anytime soon. I really expect this team to continue to surprise a lot of people. Maybe not be one of the top teams in the league, but be closer to an LNG, than maybe, or an EDG. Those are teams that realistically, OMG, you could consider them better than right now. They certainly are more consistent than those teams are right now. It's definitely an interesting conversation to have, but a lot of that is off the back of their superstar solo laners just being really good. Like I said, my player of the series is Cream, but you could give it to Shanji, you could give it to Abel. I would understand. You are doing a little bit of a flip-flop at support here. You start the series with Cold, who's kind of been there, all year long. He's your more engaged style support player. Then you bring Jerry in. He's definitely more your Enchanter support player, but they looked a lot better on Enchanters. It definitely, I felt, unlocked Abel a little bit more. It allowed him to play the style that I think he's a little bit more comfortable playing when he's not on his Samira, which is that let's farm it out, let's get into late game, and let's team fight. I think Abel's definitely a lot better at that when he's not on his Samira pick. And I think we saw that in the series on the Aphelios, especially with that Lulu. I think that could be a really difficult lane to punish, because Aphelios is going to scale, no matter what, and Lulu keeps him so safe in laning phase, while still offering some level of pressure. While it's not nearly as much as something like Jinx Nautilus, it's still enough, right? I honestly just think OMG looked really, really good here. As for FPX, not the series you wanted to see. This is their first loss, series loss, I should say, with Summit on the roster. And Summit is going to be my dud of the series here. He was actually really, really, really good in Game 1 here on the Gnar, kind of destroying Shanji's signature Shyvana pick. But it's really hard for me to look past how bad he was in Games 2 and 3, where he got completely gapped by Shanji. He was really the big weak point, I would say, of FPX. Both games were relatively close, and neither was really a blowout, but at the same time, Summit really did not look good. He lost both sides of the Gwen Gangplank matchup, which is not good at all. Shanji really, really abused him there, and I think he was a big reason why they weren't able to get a lot of pressure near the top side. Not to say everybody else on the team had a good series. I thought the bot lane honestly underperformed quite a bit. I've been hyping up LWX and Hang as one of the best bot lanes in the world. They go into Abel and Jerry for the most part here in this series, and they were the worst bot lane. It's really not even that close. Abel was pretty much just allowed to scale up on that Aphelios and was able to be a big impact in team fights, whereas LWX was just kind of non-existent, especially on that Senna in Game 2, which really didn't do anything for them. Maybe a different pick for LWX, something a little more proactive. This team has always looked better when Clid is super on the map, ganking 24/7, and a lot of that is bot side. A lot of that is Clid, LWX, and Hang as a trio, just pairing up to get one of them super, super far ahead. That's really the game plan that they have been super successful at, but when you have your top side losing like this, your mid is definitely losing here as well. Not nearly as hard. You're on some more supportive picks. You're allowed to lose a little bit more on the Sylas and on the Twisted Fate especially, but when Akali gets so far ahead, it becomes very difficult to get LWX in that position to be very, very successful. And not to say Clid had a very good series anyways, but their gameplay was just kind of thrown for a loop there. As for the outlook of these two teams, I still don't think FPX is going to fall that far down. They still show a lot more fight than I think teams like LNG and EDG do. I still have more confidence in them than I do in those other teams, but it's definitely not the best series for them. As for OMG, they continue to just take series off of teams that they really shouldn't be taking series off of. Eventually, we're going to have to consider them a good team. I think that time is definitely coming sooner rather than later, though, because they are really just they're doing everything they need to do to start breaking through into that upper echelon of mid-tier teams, where FPX is right now. So definitely glad to see that from OMG, and I'm really, really hopeful that they can continue this throughout the rest of the year. Moving on to the second series here of Day 7, we had LGD Gaming taking on Ultra Prime, and Ultra Prime finally getting another win under their belt. It felt like forever since the last time this team had actually won a series, but they do pull it off here against a intentionally handicapped LGD team. I'm really not sure at this point what they're doing with their roster changes. It really just feels like they're throwing shit at the wall and just hoping something sticks. And when something does stick, they're not waiting long enough to see if it will continue to stick, because they took out their two best players for the series. There's really no other way to put it. We'll get to that, though. We always talk about the winners first, so let's talk about Ultra Prime. They're going to be real happy to pull out a series win here, especially because the two players that I think played the best in this series are the two players that I think you were the most concerned about so far this year. That being Zoom in the top lane and Hacker in the jungle. Both had a really, really solid series here. Yes, against much weaker competition, but both looked really good. Even in the loss, like Zoom not so much, but Hacker looked really good in the loss, even on the Poppy. It's a pick that anybody who follows this channel knows I'm a really big fan of, and I think it works in this, but fortunately they weren't able to pick it in any of their wins. But looking at it, Hacker's gonna be my player of the series. He was really, really solid here. He actually just beat out Kui, which, you know, his first ever series here in the LPL. You know, sad to see it come in and get obliterated by, in my opinion, the worst jungler in the region, but it happens. Hacker, I don't think, has been, you know, he's not somebody who's never shown any signs of being good. He just hasn't been good recently. So he comes in and he looks really good, even on a pick that's as weak like Xin Zhao. Like, I really think Xin Zhao's a super weak pick in the meta right now. Hacker comes in on game 3 and he basically wins the game on it. So definitely a good look for him and a good look for Zoom. Really dominates that game 1 here on the Gwen into that Sejuani matchup. The Sejuani can be a little bit of a trap pick. It's not as safe as I think people want it to be. It's not just like Ornn tank, like safe, like how it was for so many years where you could just pick Maokai or whatever and you're fine into any matchup. You just kind of ignore the matchup and you get to late game. That's not really what Sejuani is. She doesn't really have that same kind of lane power to survive a lot of attention. And so when you pick something like Gwen that you can like take advantage of that with Wukong gank's top lane, Sejuani is in danger of those. And we saw that in game 1 where Zoom was definitely able to get ahead there. But the rest of the team still played well. Cryin, Elk, and Xiaoxi, I thought all had a relatively decent series. Xiaoxi continues to be dying way too much. The Alistar game in game 2 was not good. It just got out-supported in game 2, but we'll get to that later with LGD. Just overall, I think Ultra Prime was fine. As for LGD, yeah, like I said, you're switching out your roster for what seems like no reason. We've kind of been talking about it on this channel. Shadow and Yeji have been the two members of this team that I think have been the ones that I feel most comfortable about playing right now, and you take them both out for the series against Ultra Prime, and you get punished for it. Yes, Haichao played all right. He had a really good game 2 here on the Corki, but outside of that, like, I mean, Kui was a problem. He was really not good. He was my dud of the series pretty easily here. He just looks like a huge downgrade to Shadow, who has easily been this team's most consistent player all year long, so don't really know what the intention was there, but I imagine that experiment is relatively over. I would expect to see Shadow back in the lineup pretty soon, because Kui was really, really, really bad in this one. The bot lane, though, was a little bit of a high point, I think, for this team, especially Xin Zhao, who, you know, I've been pretty critical on as just kind of a nothing support. He actually had a really good game, too, on the Amumu. Again, when that pick goes off and does well, it can be really, really, really good. But again, when it goes poorly, you can super bait your team into some bad engages. Luckily, they were all on the same page for this one, and Xin Zhao's Amumu was actually super clutch to getting Haichao really ahead on the Corki, and especially awesome really ahead on the Kalista to be able to do a ton of damage. That Kalista and Amumu is definitely looking like both of their best lanes at this moment, and so I expect to see that a lot more, maybe in the Western regions now that we've seen it succeed in the East here, but we'll see on that. Fearness does seem to have won the top lane spot here. I do think he's probably better than Chalizi. Not by much. I really don't think there's a huge difference between those two. But Fearness, I think, just has a little bit more of a... He dies less, which I think is a positive. Although I say that, and then he had the game 1 on Sejuani. So what do I know? But yeah, honestly, LGD doesn't look super great. Most of that is just due to the fact that they swapped out their best player for a player who really was not ready to come in and play a bottom-tier team here in the LPL. So not really sure what the point of that was, but outlooks for these two teams, LGD is not good. Ultra Prime's also not good, but they're a little bit better than LGD. Like, that's really where we're at. This was a battle between two bottom-tier teams. Ultra Prime's going to be happy that they were able to pick up a win. If they would have lost this, they probably would have lost all hope for the split. But, you know, at least at this point, they can at least call themselves relatively competitive at 3-6. But for LGD, yeah, this team, while they show some potential in their losses, you know, their game score is a lot better than their series score. They really cannot pull it together in terms of actually winning 2 games on the same day. So at this point, I've lost a lot of faith in that organization because they just feel, I don't know, these roster changes just feel pointless. They feel completely pointless at this point, and I think that's definitely the sign of a panic, and I don't really get it. You knew you were going to be bad this year. I don't really get why you're panicking when you're bad, so it's definitely an interesting turn of events for LGD, but, you know, whatever they want to do, I guess they're going to do, huh? And that is going to bring us to our final series of Week 6 LPL action. And of course, it was the biggest upset of the week here. And that, of course, was Victory 5 losing to Weibo Gaming in 3. Weibo does beat the unbeatable. They end Victory 5's undefeated season. Whew, what a series this was. And really, we got to talk about him because he took over. He did it. The Shy did it. The Shy said, "Rookie, this is for you." And then dominated this series. What a fun series to watch. I really want to talk about this. So, I always talk about how I'm a little bit lower, I think, on the Shy than, like, general consensus. That's because I value consistency pretty highly in terms of the things that I like. But, man, when you can turn out performances like this, like, the Shy shows why he was at one point considered to be one of, if not the best top laner in the world when he was winning the World Championships on IG. And it's because of games like this. It's because of games like the Jax in Game 1. It's definitely because of games like the Gnar in Game 3, where he makes some actually unfreaking believable plays here. I mean, that gank top lane where he positions the Azir ult perfectly, hops out, gets Mega at the exact right time, eats the cookies perfect. Like, what do you even do in that circumstance? Like, you just go like, okay, well, he did it. Like, shout out. You know, good for him. But, yeah, he's been phenomenal. Even if he was a little bit sus in that Game 2 on the Fiora, we're going to forget that ever happened. We're going to say that the Jax game and the Gnar game are the only two games that mattered. And he was the reason that Weibo won the series. Like, I'm not going to say by himself, but, like, without him, I don't think they win this series. He was the focal point for both of their wins, and it really showed. Another player who had a really good series, though, was SOFM, who, you know, has kind of been Karsa's kryptonite a little bit. He continuously beats Karsa over and over and over again ever since that 2020 Worlds. It's unbelievable because SOFM has had such a rough split, I think, up to this point. He's definitely kind of been the weak point of this Weibo Gaming team, in my opinion. And not in this one he wasn't. He goes up against the best team in the LPL, one of the best teams in the world, and he looks really, really good in this one, just in general. He looked really good on the Viego in Game 1, Trundle in Game 3. Even on the Lee Sin, we've seen people struggle a lot more on that pick. He was actually fine on it, so shout out. And then Angel, Hwanfeng, and On were there. They didn't have to do too much. This was really a top-side focused game. They've kind of been the focal points, I think, for a lot of the season for Weibo. You know, especially Hwanfeng and On, who have kind of been, you know, this team has really wanted to play through bot lane a lot of the year so far. They did pretty well on an island this game, or this series. They weren't exactly perfect, but they weren't exactly bad either. You would expect On to run it down a little bit more if he's not given more attention. But honestly, he was pretty good here. So, yeah, Weibo looks really, really solid. This is exactly what you wanted to see from them. As for Victory 5, it's a tough loss to take. It's not the worst loss in the world to take. Big shout out to Photic, who actually was pretty good this series. He was really the bright spot of Victory 5. It's pretty easy to look good on the Aphelios when your team is winning, but it's a lot tougher to look on it when your team isn't exactly dominating every part of the map, and it's especially tough into something like a Jax. So, big shout out to Photic. He had a really good series here. Him and PP God, I think, actually both played relatively well, but the top side just didn't hold up. Like I said, Rich was just super outclassed. He's my dud of the series here. He was just super outclassed by the Shy. The Shy had one of those series where he was one of the best players in the world, and Rich in lane is just never going to be able to match that. Dying over and over again. The Gwen Game 1 was really, really rough for him. And then Karsa got out jungled by SOFM. Really, there's no other way to put it. Karsa was the second best jungler in this series, so definitely not what you wanted to see there. Ricky was all right. He definitely had some good games. He had a pretty rough Game 3 here on the Azir, but, you know, it is what it is. Like I said, Photic and PP God were really the bright spots, but as for the outlook of these teams, Victory 5 isn't going to be too upset by this loss. Weibo's one of those coin flip teams, right? I've been talking about it on this channel. You can go back and watch all my LPL videos. They can beat any team in the world, and they're also, you know, they could lose to WE. And honestly, neither would surprise me. That's just the way Weibo rolls, right? Like, they are so talented, and they are so aggressive that sometimes it will lead them to even be better than their talent level suggests, and sometimes it will blow up in their faces. But really, that's the fun of this team, and that's the reason I think they are so dangerous. Very similar to a team like DRX in the LCK, even similar to something like a top esports in this league as well. I really think they could beat anybody in the world, which we saw here today. So, big shout out to Weibo. Are they a top team? I don't know. They're still a little too inconsistent for me, but honestly, like, they're closer than I thought they would be before going into this series. All right, that is going to do it for my Week 6 LPL overview and analysis of all 7 days of games. Up on the screen right now, you're going to be seeing the updated Week 6 standings in order from 1st to 17th. Next to that, you're going to see a power rankings column. That is where I personally power rank those teams from 1 to 17. Next to that, you're going to see how that has changed from previous weeks, up or down. Let's go over the risers and the fallers. Biggest riser this week? OMG. OMG jumping up from number 10 in my power rankings to number 7. I really think they have been that impressive. I'm not sure they're going to stay there all split above teams like LNG and above teams like EDG, but I would be lying if I told you they don't look better than them right now. I genuinely believe that. I don't know if that will last, but right now it certainly does look like they are right there in the conversation. Other smaller risers this week, Rare Atom leapfrogs LGD up to 14, and then as you'll probably notice at the top of my power rankings, Victory 5 with their first loss of the year actually falls down to number 2 for me. Knight and Tian are just different. They're just built different. Right now, to me, that is the best team in the LPL. I really think it's 1A, 1B. If you want to say the Victory 5 is the best team in the LPL, I completely understand. If you want to say the top esports is the best team in the LPL, I completely understand. It is, like I said, 1A, 1B. You pick. Like, for me, it's top esports because I like the upside that they have a little bit more, but if you want to go with Rookie and V5, I certainly do not blame you. As for the biggest faller this week, it is going to be LNG, falling down to number 9. They were number 7 last week. They continue their big downward spiral. They've had a very, very, very bad couple of weeks here. They need to figure something out. Jungle mid is not working. They are throwing shit at the wall in top lane. We've seen them call up a sub ADC. Maybe they want to fill in for Light soon. There are a lot of problems that this team has, and they need to figure it out. Obviously, Iwandi versus Lumao, they have to get on track before I feel comfortable about putting them any higher than this. They are very, very close to being put below a team like Anyone's Legend, but just couldn't quite fit that in. Anyone's Legend, unfortunately, does drop a spot just because of how high I raised OMG. They fall down just in terms of, you know, the standings and stuff. And like I said, LGD and Victory 5 both get leapfrogged here. But that is going to be it for standings. My player of the week for week 6 is going to go to Ming on RNG. A very, very good week for him. He was really, really good, and he has really been the catalyst for RNG all year long, but especially right now. I think this team is really struggling to generate their own leads in lane, and Ming has been a big, big reason why they have consistently been able to do that, especially on engaged champions. I expect that to continue. Honorable mention very quickly to go to Bin, who on a really struggling BLG team continues to look like the light of the team. So definitely an honorable mention there, but player of the week is going to go to Ming. And my dud of the week is actually going to go to Doenby on LNG. He was really bad this week. There's really no other way to put it. He was bad in both series, and he continues to show that he needs a lot of resources and a lot of jungle attention with Tarzan to make a lot of plays around the map. And sometimes that's not beneficial for the team that maybe wants to play through Light. Or maybe wants to give Ollie a few more resources in the top lane if he is playing. But yeah, just not a good week from Doenby. Certainly not what I would have wanted to see. An honorable mention there, I guess, would be Bew on WE, but it was a pretty easy decision to select Doenby this week as my dud of the week. So yeah, Doenby is dud of the week, and Ming is my player of the week. But that is going to do it for my Week 6 LPL video. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like. It really does mean a lot. Let me know what your favorite series of the week was, who your player of the week, your dud of the week, all of that was down in the comment section below. I love chatting it up with you guys. You know that. But with that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.